The first step in assembly is to populate the motherboard, which is easier to do outside of the case. A good non-conductive workspace is the box the motherboard came in, so just place it on top of that box. It also, when you're pressing items into the motherboard, it allows for some flexibility. Okay, on the back is where we're going to place the bracket that's going to mount your CPU cooler or your water pump in my case, but it's the same. Then we're going to install the standoffs around the CPU where the cooler is going to be attached or the fan pump is going to be attached. Next up is installing the CPU. That's a fairly easy process. What we're going to do is there is a clamp, a retaining clamp, holding down a lid. And we can move that up, and then we're going to take the CPU out of the packaging and place it in the socket. Now on the CPU, so you can tell which way it's oriented, there's a little triangle that'll fit only one way in the socket, so make sure that that's oriented. And you don't want to put your hands all over the bottom of the CPU and get oil on it, so handle it the minimum you can. When you replace that retaining bar, it's going to pop out the plastic protector. You can store that somewhere and keep it. So next up is our memory. In this case, I'm installing two 8 GB memories. Now, they're not going to be installed right next to each other. So if you're not filling up all the slots, consult your motherboard manual so you see which slots you need to put them in. When you press down, there's a notch that will align it, and those brackets at the end, you can tell they'll positively click and they'll come up to capture the memory. Next thing is, in this case, we're going to be putting a M.2 SSD actually installed on the motherboard. So the first thing we have to do is remove the heatsink that's going to be on top of the SSD, because the SSD runs fairly hot. In fact, mine runs about 40 degrees centigrade. So it's installed. One of the things you have to do to install it, it needs a standoff, and there are several holes, so measure which one it needs. In my case, it was 110 millimeters. And then you're going to press it into the socket at a 45-degree angle. It doesn't go straight in. In fact, as soon as I move my hands, you'll see what I mean. So there we go. So it's installed at that angle. Now we have to put in a screw to hold it down to the standoff on the motherboard. Once the screw is in place holding down the SSD, we can replace the heatsink that goes on top of it. But there's some material on the bottom of the heatsink that's kind of sticky, so take off the tape first. And what that is to absorb the heat that this generates. So once it's in place and it's on your standoff, you're going to put another screw in that will keep the heatsink in place. Okay, that's it. That's the population of the entire motherboard. We put in memory, the CPU, the cooler standoffs, and the SSD. So now you're ready to prepare your case next.